So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste and a very warm welcome to all of you to the 21st Parliamentary Session of the World Teen Parliament. तो नमस्कार, आप सभी का स्वागत है विश्व किशोर संसद के 21वें संसदीय सत्र में. I am very happy to welcome all the teen MPs and influencers from all across the world of the World Teen Parliament, and also very happy to welcome all the audience who has joined us on YouTube. If you have any questions during the complete conversation, if you want to ask something to the speakers today or interact with them, please feel free to put your comments, your questions in the chat, and we'll try to take them up during the conversation today in the next 60 minutes here at the 21st Parliamentary Session. Thank you so much once again. Before we start the session, let me give you a quick update about what exactly is the Teen Parliament, what are we trying to do, and what exactly is happening since the last 2 years at the World Teen Parliament. So since 2021, when the idea of the Teen Parliament got its genesis, it was simply an initiative where we wanted to bring together 100 teenagers who could really improve the world with their ideas, their thoughts, and their work. And the World Teen Parliament would become a platform for them where we could give them training and also fund their ideas so that they can work on ideas of world improvement. So it's kind of a democracy come public policy come design thinking cohort, which brings different kinds of a skill set together and tells teenagers or gives them an experience of how does a democracy work and how does the public trust in certain people drives the whole world. So how do you typically build that kind of an ecosystem where you are able to command that trust and also at the same time have empathy for it and respect it while you have it? Because as a representative of the people, this is something that you must understand and must manifest as a role of a member of parliament. Today, when we start this 21st parliamentary session, every month we do one parliamentary session where we try to bring in policymakers and experts from all across the world to come and interact with the teen MPs and influencers and share their experience with them and even answer their questions. So today, we're very happy to welcome both our guests for being here and being a part of the 21st parliamentary session. A very warm welcome to Mr. Honourable Claudius James Francis, who's currently the Speaker for the House of Assembly of St. Lucia, Parliament of St. Lucia from West Indies. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time and being here with us. A very warm welcome to you. And I would also like to welcome Dr. Pradeep Khosla, the Chancellor of the University of California, San Diego, La Jolla, California, USA. Thank you so much, Pradeep, sir, for joining us, and a very warm welcome to you. The format for today's session is we'll have opening addresses of both our speakers, and then there are some questions that I would have, and then we'll go into the questions of these teen MPs who come from all across the world. Let me invite the first speaker for today to initiate the 21st parliamentary session of the World Teen Parliament. A very warm welcome to Honourable Claudius James Francis, the Speaker for the House of Assembly of St. Lucia, Parliament of St. Lucia, West Indies. A very warm welcome, sir. Over to you for the opening address.
Well, it's good morning in St. Lucia. It's just about 10:30 a.m. Saturday. So a pleasant good morning to all of you. And I must say, just seeing some of you and reading about the Teen Parliament, I feel young again. So thank you very much for that. Let me also say good morning to my fellow MPs. I think I heard Daksh say that there were a couple of MPs also on the stream. Thank you for joining, because I think having young people understand politics and wanting to get into politics is critical for the future of our individual territories. So, young people, brothers and sisters, I have been asked to address you on a topic of great significance, largely teenage parliamentarians. In a world that is rapidly evolving, the role of young people in politics has never been more crucial. And we'll explore the importance, the potential power of teenagers, their responsibilities, and how they can seek further guidance in the future along a possible political journey. But first, let me briefly comment on the position of a member of parliament. And I'm not going to give any long speech, just to say, listen, there is nothing you do, and there is nothing that you will do that is not largely guided by what politicians think. How much you pay in taxes, how many years of incarceration you face if you were to breach the law. All of these are dictated by politicians. And therefore, it is important that young people who understand themselves better than we do get involved in politics. Politicians also have a certain level of immunity. So when we get into our individual parliaments, we are largely free to say literally anything that we want without any fear of being prosecuted or sued civilly. That's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's just like technology. It's how you use it which decides whether it's bad or good. But it is largely good in that it gets politicians to really say freely what's on their minds without any fear of somebody prosecuting them. Teenagers are often the harbingers of change and innovation. Their fresh perspectives, their boundless energy, and unwavering commitment to positive transformation can breathe new life into our political landscape. It is essential to recognize the profound importance of teenage parliamentarians in shaping our future. I have to tell you, in St. Lucia, we think we hold the world record for the youngest elected parliamentarian. She was elected just a month or two before her 21st birthday. And she is currently our United Nations ambassador. She served 2 terms between 1997 and 2006, and then she became our ambassador, a position she holds currently at the United Nations. And that's a young lady, not even a young man. Teenage parliamentarians bring diversity and representation to the forefront of politics. They are the voices of marginalized groups and underrepresented communities, advocating for concerns that often go unheard. These young leaders offer fresh perspectives, unburdened by the constraints of tradition. They are more inclined to embrace innovative solutions to pressing issues such as climate change, technology, and social justice. I have my cell phone. I use my cell phone to make telephone calls. You young people do so much more with it. So I recognize your ability to be innovative. The power of teenagers today cannot be underestimated. They have the ability to influence change in ways that were previously unimaginable. Teenagers are often tech savvy, harnessing the power of social media and digital platforms to mobilize and educate their peers, making them a potent force for change. The youthful idealism and passion of teenagers drive them to tackle complex problems with enthusiasm, determination, and a commitment to making a difference. When you get to my age, you do things because you have to do them, not because there is any enthusiasm to do them. Teenagers have the power to vote and engage in advocacy. Their political involvement can shape election outcomes and influence policy discussions. Teenage parliamentarians must, however, recognize the weight of their responsibilities and the impact they can have in society. Well informed about the issues they advocate for, conducting thorough research and analysis to make informed decisions. They must engage in constructive dialogue, even when facing opposing viewpoints. That is paramount. Finding common ground and working collaboratively is essential to effective governance. Teenage parliamentarians must uphold high ethical standards, practicing honesty, integrity, and accountability are not just expectations, but obligations. I have to tell you, even in your young lives, you may have heard that politics is a corrupt profession. Don't accept that. I believe there are corrupt people who involve themselves in politics. But I don't believe politics as a profession is corrupt. There are bad priests, there are bad police officers, there are bad teachers. Politics as a profession is no different. It may be that there are far greater opportunities to practice corruption in a political sphere, but that does not mean politics itself is corrupt. Teenage parliamentarians should not embark on this journey alone. You can get guidance from those who've been there before. Experienced lawmakers can provide invaluable mentorship, offering insights, advice, and wisdom gained through years of political service. The fact is, we have been where you are now. You have not been where we are. So our mentorship is critical. Building a network of contacts within the political sphere can also open doors to opportunities and resources. Networking events, conferences, and internships can be excellent avenues for this. And even in terms of scholarship, many organizations and institutions offer scholarship, specifically tailored for young leaders pursuing political careers. These scholarships can ease the financial burden of education and training. In conclusion, because I was only given 7 minutes, so we can't get into too much detail. In conclusion, teenage parliamentarians represent a beacon of hope for our political future. Previously, we thought of the young politicians as being 32, 33, and 35. We now recognize that we need to go even further to our teenagers. Their importance lies in their ability to bring diversity, fresh perspectives, and idealism to our political systems. Today's teenagers wield immense power through their technological proficiency, passion, and voting potential. However, with power comes responsibility, and teenage parliamentarians must exercise their roles with integrity, informed decision-making, and a commitment to constructive dialogue. To excel in their journey, they should seek guidance and experienced mentors, expand their networks, and explore whatever scholarship opportunities are available. Together, not separately, together, the older parliamentarians and the teenage parliamentarians can empower young leaders to create a brighter and more inclusive future for all of us. I do look forward to hearing from all of you. I look forward especially to hearing from Professor Khosla and any questions you may have for me at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for this amazing opening address to the 21st Parliamentary session. And I think something amazing that you've shared is that all of the teenagers must remember that all the amazing people who come to this platform and they share their time with you, they have been where you are right now, but you have never been to the places and never had those kind of experiences that they already or currently are having. So take their mentorship, learn to ask the right questions so that you are able to get into areas which are unexplored, because humanity has only grown because of its curiosity. So don't let your curiosity die and ask the right questions to the right people. Thank you so much, sir, for starting and initiating the 21st Parliamentary session. Let me invite the next speaker for today. A very warm welcome to Dr. Pradeep Khosla, the Chancellor of the University of California, San Diego, from La Jolla, California, USA. Pradeep, sir, over to you for the next 7 to 8 minutes for your opening address, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Daksh. I wish I could add significantly more to what my colleague, Mr. Francis, has already said. So let me just take what he has said, and trust me, everything that he said are things that I would have said. But let me just put my own twist on it and just talk to you instead of giving you a little speech. Let's take a position. Any position, by implicitly, the position offers you a bully pulpit. So for me, the chancellor position offers a bully pulpit. But the effectiveness is not one of the position. The effectiveness is one of the person who's able to be in that position and use the position very effectively. So my first advice to you all is don't let the position or its power get to your head. What should get to your head is your own abilities. And what are you doing to gather the experiences that you will be able to effectively use the bully pulpit that has been given to you. And this is extremely important. Now, being an educator, I can tell you the road to salvation is all about education. So I actually believe the road to self-improvement is education. The road to social mobility is education. The road to improving society is education. The road to peace on earth is education. The road to dealing with climate change is education. So it's all about education, education, education. And given the diversity of people I see on the screen, you each get to decide what aspect are you going to specialize in. And I think your power comes, like I said, through the position and through you, the individual, and how you position yourself. And then there's another power that comes through you as a collective. The parliament is a collective. How do you work with each other? How do you address problems of great significance? How do you identify problems of great significance? So these words of quote unquote wisdom might seem very simple. They are actually simple, but when you start implementing them, you realize the complexity. This is where we as human beings have to understand what are we trying to strive for? How's our ego coming into play? And I can just go into the complexity of how what is so simple is actually extremely difficult to implement. So just keep that in your mind. Now, what are the things you need to do? We already talked about curiosity. Curiosity, you gotta keep on being curious your whole life. So I heard Mr. Francis say, oh, I do things because I have to, which might be true, but personally, as Chancellor, I do things because I want to. I've only taken those positions in life where I did not see that as work. I saw that as a path to changing humanity, a path to changing an individual's life. And I think what we need to understand is broad goals like, for example, changing humanity, causing peace on earth are fine, but they're very hard to implement. They're actually like boiling the ocean. So the way to implement that is one person at a time. So in your life, you have to live what you are trying to create. The change you're trying to create in the world is the change you have to live on a daily basis. So when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, are you really living the change, or you're just saying the words? And this is extremely important. Mentorship. We talked about, Mr. Francis talked about mentorship. Now, there is a general belief out there that mentors have to be older than you. Whereas my belief is mentor is anybody who I can learn from. I learned from my teenage daughter. I learned from my 30-year-old son. I learned from my 80-year-old friends. And I learned from everybody I interact with. So when I talk about curiosity, it's not just about book knowledge. It's also about understanding people. Be curious about people. Why do they behave the way they behave? Why do they have the goals they have? What in their life made them think that way? And what is it that you can learn from that? And how is it that you can absorb it and internalize it, as in make it part of your own life? So as I think about my personal life, I can tell you there are aspects of me that represent aspects that I've picked up from many, many people. My parents, my mother, my father, my grandfather, my teachers, my friends, my mentors, my kids. Everybody is reflected in how I think. And that ability, again, seems very simple, but you have to practice, practice, practice. Next thing, when you wake up in the morning, don't look at your life as a bunch of things you have to do. Look at your life a day at a time as decisions you have to make. Everything you have to do is a consequence of decision that you have decided to make. And if that decision is not a consequential decision, you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? Again, so don't think of your life, your day as a series of chores, or I got to do this, I got to do that. It is a series of decisions that you have made to do A, B, C, D, E. And the question is, why are you making those decisions? How are they affecting you? How are they affecting the world around you? So let me then finish by saying, educate yourself to the most possible extent. There is nothing you can, there's hardly an education that you should not have. And this is not just about degrees, it could also be about watching, TED Talks, for example. I learn a lot from TED Talks at my age because I don't have time to go through a curriculum or a program. But at your age, I think you should be looking at first formal education. And when you think about formal education, the most significant part of that formal education is partly domain content, but more importantly, problem-solving ability and capacity. And problem-solving is not just technology. Problem-solving is solving problems of personal interactions, solving societal problems. I can go down the list. Every issue, I personally, in my style of leadership, I see it as a problem and how am I going to solve it, which involves a discovery phase, which involves an implementation phase, which involves an evaluation phase. Did I solve the problem? And it is not just one of discovery forever, right? So just very simple piece of advice for you. But I think what you have done is demonstrated that you have the potential. That's why you're here. And I'm so glad that you gave me the chance to speak to you. Congratulations, everybody, for what you accomplished. And I'm looking forward to you accomplishing way more and really changing the world to be a much better place than I have been able to do in my time on this world. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, sir, for the opening address at the 21st Parliamentary session. Now it's time to get into the questions. So I hope all our teen MPs are ready with their questions. But before we go into the questions, I have a question of my own that I want to ask. First, with specifically Claudius, sir. You are a speaker of a parliament. You have to control so many people with such strong opinions, with absolute immunity. What are the most challenging things that you're faced in life when you talk of the ethics of being a speaker and at the same time giving them the opportunity to speak everything with immunity? How do you balance that? Over to you, sir.
Well, let's be clear about it. Politicians have the greatest egos in the world. I mean, just imagine that you think that you are the person best suited to represent 500,000 people. That in itself is an egotistical position. It might be true, but it's an egotistical position. So politicians come into the parliament with the greatest ego, that they're not just there by themselves, but they are representing so many people. So one has to tread as the presiding officer very carefully how you deal with them. Now, presiding officers have a tremendous amount of authority. Having read all the rules myself, and I'm now into my 8th year as a presiding officer, I do believe the powers of a presiding officer are excessive. And it is perhaps because I have never had reason to use it from my own parliament. But a presiding officer can have, I told you about immunity, but a presiding officer can have a member of parliament arrested by the police for disrespecting the House. His immunity does not extend to disrespect to the speaker. But with great responsibility, with great powers, come great responsibilities. So one has to temper all of those powers given to you as a presiding officer with the responsibility of ensuring that a House meeting is not about you, but about the bill that is before the House and about the members who were elected. So it's a great balancing act.
Thank you so much. So you have been a TV show host who could, be very humorous in a talk show. You are right now in a very serious position trying to balance such heavy duty egos. So thank you so much for that response. before we go into get more questions, there's one specific question for Dr. Pradeep Khosla. So when we are trying to understand or typically read about you, the work you have done, your academic interests and your research interests are, very, very varied or multidisciplinary. Could you just, make it basically dumb it down for all of us, that how has your academic work, or how is your academic work impacting the daily lives of people across the world, or how will it be impacting their daily lives? Over to you, sir. Sorry.
So, this is where I've been extremely fortunate, and I think I'm going to just attribute this to dumb luck. So my academic work was in the area of robotics and in autonomous vehicles. And all these years, I never thought they would be real during my lifetime. And here we are. I still have a few good years left, and they're all real. So that's the fortunate part. The unfortunate part is exactly when my technical skills and my outputs are being used, I personally have decided to be more administrative and leadership oriented. So now I'm trying to wrestle in my own head, create a balance of how do I build these skills into other people and propagate the work that I started, right? And it's not just me, there's a whole lot of people who started. Let me add one more thing. I think as young people, very few of you would become politicians. So there's a career of a politician, but then every one of us has a politician in us. Interacting with other people is politics. It's a different type of politics, it's a different scale of politics. And we all have the power to influence each other. So just remember, even if you don't have a politician for your career, there is a politician in you. Without that politician, you will not be as successful as you could be. So,
if I may just add about the importance of young people and utilize a cricket analogy. The greatest cricketers are those who were picked for their countries almost as teenagers. Virat Kohli, Sachin Tendulkar, when they began their careers, at that age, they were fearless. They were going to be more carefree than the person who was chosen for the country at 25, 30 years old. And it's the same thing in politics. The young people are coming with an energy, with a vision, and that is why it is so important that they do get into politics. I understand what Dr. Khosla just said, that many of them may not get into politics. I hope and honestly hope he's wrong, because we do need those young people in politics. Look at what is happening in the United States. The two people who are most likely to face off for the presidential elections next year in November will both be over 80 years old, 80. And I have nothing against age. But at 80 years, do you really relate to 19-year-olds and 17-year-olds? Do you really know what those young people want? No. Now, look at what has happened in the House of Representatives in the United States. You have young people like Oscar, the female from New York, but you don't have the same energy in the Senate, where the average age of a senator is nearly 60 years old. So you do need young people. And whilst I believe what Dr. Khosla said is true, that not many of them will get into politics, I really hope we are wrong, because we need them.
But what I was trying to say is, even if you don't get into politics, there's a politician in all of us. So the fundamentals of politics is really important for all of us to understand.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much to both our speakers for the opening addresses. Now it's time for the questions from our teen MPs who come from all parts of the world. So let me now invite them one by one to ask their questions. Now, beyond this point, any question can be answered by both of our guests. The person who's asking, he may direct the question to one individual, but if the other one wants to contribute something, please feel free to contribute wherever you want. It's now an open floor, and it's the question session of the 21st Parliamentary session. Let me invite the first question from MP Tanushri Meher, who's from Ryan International School, Bengaluru, Karnataka, India. Tanushri, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir. Warm greetings to one and all present here. My name is Tanushri Meher, an MP of the World Teen Parliament, studying in grade 8 at Ryan International School, Kundanahalli, Bengaluru, Karnataka, India. And my question is to Sir Claudius James Francis. So what is your opinion on the impact of social media on politics, including its effects on, in terms of information flows, outreach, mobilization, surveillance, political polarization, and spread of misinformation? How do you think policymakers should address these issues, particularly in domains of spread of misinformation? Thank you.
Social media is the best thing to have happened and is the worst thing to have happened. It's good in the sense that it gives greater reach to politicians and others. At the same time, it has also given a platform to major disinformation. The thing about disinformation, though, is the more democratic the country that you live in, the more difficult it is to control disinformation. In fact, in some countries, the right to lie is almost enshrined in the Constitution. So there is very little you can do about disinformation. And you may say, let's fight disinformation with the truth. Well, there is an old saying that the truth runs like a long distance runner, but a lie is a Usain Bolt. It just moves and takes over within seconds. And it takes you almost a month to debunk that one lie, within which time another 21 lies have come up. So it's very difficult to fight disinformation. You look at, again, the United States. 3 years later, fully 46% of the United States believes that Joseph Biden did not win the election. That is how dangerous social media can be. But as I said, it has its good side in that you can reach far more people than you ordinarily would reach. I'll tell you something, for example. In St. Lucia, during the COVID pandemic, we were about to have an election, and my party was very fearful that our normal in-person interactions with the voters was going to be problematic because you could not interact with people because of COVID. But COVID forced us to use social media in a way we never thought possible. And we were able to get to our constituents far more easily than had we been in person. So to answer your question more directly, the more democratic the country is, the more difficult it is to stop disinformation.
Actually, can I add to that? I'm going to offer a different twist on that. I think pretty much, Claudius, what you said is the more democratic you are, the more misinformation there would be. I don't know if I agree with that, because the more autocratic you are, the more misinformation there would be, except you would not know that because there's only one piece of information coming to you. So I can go down the list of countries which are extremely autocratic, either on the African continent or European, like or Russia, or I can just go down that list. Okay, so it's not clear to me democracy has to do much with misinformation. I think misinformation has got to do with, in this instance, the velocity of communication. We had newspapers before, which was a mass communication mechanism. Why is it that the newspapers did not have a lot of misinformation? Actually, they did. The reason they didn't have as much is there were multiple layers of editorial processes and checks and balances that allowed one to filter and moderate and curate that information. In this age of social media, where we are all publishers and subscribers and creators and consumers all simultaneously, there is no filtering process. So then the question to ask is society doomed because there is no filtering process? And this is where I'm going to come back and say, I don't think so. I think this is where education is the answer. Education, the problem with our society is, including the US, that the education is not as widespread as you would think. It's easy for people to think, oh, India is not as educated, or Africa is not. But even in the US, only a third of the population has an undergrad degree. For a country which is the richest in the world, the highest GDP, it's not as educated as you would think. The other thing we need to think about is highly religious, more like ideological upbringing and ideological communities where ideology decides what you can think and what you cannot think. And this is why we have wars amongst religions, amongst people of different religions, because we think that religion B is not as good as A. So what I'm trying to argue again is the ability for broad-based education, think openly, have an open mind, have a lot of conversation, is how misinformation is going to be handled. So I don't subscribe to democracy is bad for misinformation, or nepotism is bad. They're all actually too much freedom and too little freedom. They're all bad in my mind.
I agree with Dr. Khosla, except I would just change one thing he just said.
Yes, sir.
Knowledge and not education is the key.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Because you can be very well educated and not have the particular knowledge.
Yep,
So I would just change the word education to knowledge, but I agree with him.
Education being the key, I think at the end of the day, a big question that comes in while this conversation happens is the transition from education to knowledge, or being educated to having wisdom. We actually don't have a mechanism for it in education, that how do we transform somebody into somebody who's wise? So how do we inculcate wisdom? I would, if Pradeep sir or Claudius sir, whoever wants to take this, I would request your opinion on this. That what process do we have in education so that we are able to really, create the next generation of people who are wise, who are not just educated?
So I think wisdom is a higher level of abstraction. I would, before we get to wisdom, be thinking more about how do we build rational decision-making processes or capacities in every individual, right? And what does rational decision-making mean? And this is where I think ideological upbringing has a limitation. So to me, rational decision-making is every one of us should have the ability to have multiple hypotheses in our head, like hypotheses like Trump is good and Trump is bad, Biden is good, Biden is bad, simultaneously. Look at all the information that's available to us, argue the hypothesis, and then reach some level of conclusion with some level of confidence. If you're a philosopher, you will know that there is nothing called absolute truth, which is why the ability for multiple religions and multiple truths to exist simultaneously and never be challenged, right? I mean, they're all challenged by it. So that's the ability. And I think at some point what happens is when you're able to do that time after time and have multiple experiences and then condense it to something as simple as, Daksh, you should not make that decision, in a very simple way, you would call it wisdom, whereas that is an outcome of multiple years of decision-making, where you can see the pattern of that situation and immediately say, don't do that.
So I would actually want to bring in Claudius sir at this point. What Khosla sir talked about is basically giving the ability in every human being to understand that how do you have two opposing hypotheses in your mind at the same time, and being able to argue within yourself and then reach a decision. But when such a scenario happens, it becomes a problem for the political class, because politics essentially in democracy needs polarization. If there's no polarization, coming into power becomes difficult. So politics wants to hinder this ability, but education wants to, further manifest it. So what's your thought on it?
No, the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. Again, it goes back to one of the things I began with, the egos of politicians. And once we accept that we don't ourselves have all of the answers, we may be the ones ultimately responsible for making the decisions, but it does not mean we must make those decisions absent of dialogue with other people who may have a better understanding. Far too often, for example, I've seen in our parliament, and I dare say it must take place in other parliaments, when we pass laws and we think we are passing it for the benefit of a particular profession or section of society, and we have never spoken to those people. We have never asked them what it is they want. We just assume we know what they want, and we pass laws to deal with that. So the first thing we must do is, yes, ultimately the decision is ours to make, but it must not be a decision absent of widespread dialogue.
I would first like to, thank you so much for accepting that on a public forum, that yes, Parliament and policymakers don't talk to the people who get impacted by policies. This is something that we try to tell our teen MPs at the World Teen Parliament, that always try to understand the stakeholders involved. Only then go ahead with your own thoughts. Don't build a castle of your thoughts. Have empathetic thoughts coming in from all portions. Thank you so much, sir. Let me invite the next question from...
One second. What you just said is not just true for politicians. Anybody who's a leader has multiple constituencies that they are responsible for making decisions for. It could be a manager with 5 people, or it could be me with 40,000 people, or it could be Claudius with 500,000 people. It's the same strategy.
Absolutely. So it typically is not just specific to being an MP or a parliamentarian or a parliament. It's actually across the board. So, the next question comes from Aryan Singh. Aryan, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Wait a second, sir. Please give me a moment. Yes, sir. So, greetings to all dignitaries. I'm Aryan Singh, influencer from Balbhavan Public School, Delhi, India. So, my question is directed towards Dr. Pradeep Khosla. Sir, I have heard great things about the University of California, one of the top universities in the United States. So, sir, you are the Chancellor of UCSD, University of California, San Diego, but you received your Bachelor's in Technology degree from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur in 1980. So, sir, do you believe the education system in India is inferior to that of United States, having experience from both sides? I believe that you are aware with the current education system right now.
Yeah.
So, do you believe it is inferior? If so, how do you think can we solve this issue without jeopardizing our academic integrity? And if you don't agree, then how do you plan to solve it for yourself? Thanks.
So, right. Thank you, Aryan. That's actually very perceptive. So I actually don't think the education system is inferior or superior either way. I just think they are different. And the differences actually have a big impact. So I'll give you an example. In India, the education system, if I may say so, is more elitist. There is this notion of, because the demand is so large and the capacity to deliver, to satisfy the demand is very limited, they have created these tests. So take the test for IITs. Or when I went there, about, 200,000 people applied for admission. Many were already self-filtered, and only about 1,000 were picked. Now, if you understand anything about statistics, you realize that out of 200,000 people, picking only 1,000 people who you think are qualified to do an education program in engineering is actually fraught with statistical errors. But somehow we use the grading system, the marks as you call it, or the whatever, to really rank order. So that's the Indian system. The US system is more egalitarian. The US system believes that everybody has the capacity to be whoever they want to be. This is the other extreme now. Everybody can get an undergrad degree. And the system is such that we have a large array of opportunities from small parochial colleges to large public institutions. And I can go through the diversity of the educational system here, that everybody can find a place for themselves and really find a way to be educated and really be comfortable in that environment, right? So those are the fundamental differences. But in spite of those differences, I told you only a third of this country has an undergrad degree. In India, it's much less than that. But India is also like 5 times or 4 times the size of this country, has not had the infrastructure that is needed. But right now, I think India is in a very significant upward trajectory in building infrastructure, in creating the opportunity for people, right? So I would not call it inferior, superior. I would call it different models of pedagogy, different models of access. So what I'm talking about is access for any country to really achieve its potential, which is the potential of all the people. You got to create access to opportunity. And part of that opportunity is access to education. So access, I mean, what limits people in a country is limiting access.
Thank you so much, sir.
We would also want the opinion of Claudius, sir, if possible, on this, that what Khosla sir talked about, that access is a very critical element of education. So how is your parliament in your country, guaranteeing more access to and inclusivity and diversity within your own country? And what should other countries be doing to guarantee this access of quality education to everyone?
Thank you. So first, I want to agree with Dr. Khosla. In fact, if you look at the American system, it is as good as it is because of immigrants. I mean, you look at the number of Nobel laureates that the Americans have, nearly 50% are not American born, or at least not American ancestry. So it is their diversity that makes it as good as it is. But I think India's system is just as good. I actually had the good fortune of going to college with identical twins from India, the Mukerjis, and I'm yet to sit anywhere in the world with 2 gentlemen as brilliant as these. But in terms of our own St. Lucian experience, we are not a wealthy country. We are a very small island. We are actually smaller than Singapore, and Singapore's population is pretty close to 10 million. Ours is only 200,000. That's like a street in India. So we are a small country. But what we have done beginning last year is to make education from kindergarten to secondary absolutely free. So that's one way we are trying to get everybody involved. And even at secondary school, the government has decided in the first instance to pay the cost of the examination for English and maths for everybody. That's the start. We think these are the foundation subjects. So we're beginning with that. The aim is to eventually pay every subject for every child, because there are lots of brilliant children whose parents may not have the ability to pay for the education, even at that low level. So we have decided, yes, it's one thing to pay for university education, but how many people get up to university education? So we believe we are better off beginning at the lower kindergarten, primary, and secondary levels. So we have begun that process of giving free education at these levels.
Thank you so much, sir. There's a big challenge that India faces, specifically when we talk of education, that we have to teach a very big mass of people. So experimentation and doing something new in education becomes a little difficult, but still the government is doing a lot with the new education policy coming in. But I think it's a good opportunity for countries with a little less population to experiment in new things in education, because it could be something like Finland, which is, since it has a limited population to teach, they can do a lot of experimentation. So I think this is something that even you should, if possible, consider. And if there are some learning, share with the world that, okay, this is something that we experimented and other people can also learn from it. So let's now have the next question from Vandita Bhardwaj. Vandita, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Vandita Bhardwaj, an MP at the Second World Teen Parliament. I'm a grade 12 student at Chennai Vidyalaya Vasant Vihar, New Delhi, India. My question is addressed to Dr. Pradeep Khosla. Sir, considering your role as Chancellor and your expertise in engineering, could you discuss a unique initiative or project at UC San Diego that you're proud of and how it's impacting both students and the broader community?
So thank you, Vandita. Again, a very perceptive question. I talked about access, and you might be thinking that maybe the US has infinite access to education and India does not. Amazingly, US does not have infinite access to education. If you look at the economics in the US, nearly half the country cannot afford to send their kids to college. This is a very dangerous situation for a democracy. A good democracy thrives on a broad-based middle class. So if you look at a country with a median income of 65,000 for a family of four, and half the country cannot afford to send their kids to college, this is problematic. So as the Chancellor of a public institution, I think it's my role, even though I'm not a politician, to really create policies that impact and affect the communities around me and the surroundings around me. So what I've done, and this is a program I'm really proud of, is created a program where every year, 1,000 of the neediest students whose family income is less than 40,000 a year, which is, by the way, not a lot of money in San Diego, California, are guaranteed 4 years of debt-free education. So that's something I'm really proud of. What I am disappointed by is the need is more than 1,000 students per year. And we are not at a point where every student who deserves debt-free is going debt-free. So that's what I'm working towards. But given that I'm not the government and I cannot print money, I have limitations when I'm not able to print money. But if I was able to print money, then I could make education free for everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, sir. I think there's one question that comes, organically at this point. I don't know whether I should be asking you that.
Go for it.
Once you became the Chancellor of University of California, there was a lot of media conversation around your remuneration. A lot of people talked about it. So how did you feel about it? That why was it such a big point of discussion in the media? And how did it impact you as an individual?
So, look, even though from where you sit, you might think it's all the US and it's a capitalistic country, the US is not a homogeneous country and not every state is capitalistic. And so California, which represents the best of technology in the world, also is more unionized and more socialistic than most places. New York, which represents the best of financial capitals in the world, is also very unionized. I mean, this is not known to people, right? So when I came to the US, to me, New York and California represented what America was. And amazingly, they are not exactly what people's view of America is. So that's one thing. Secondly, the newspapers are always looking for fodder to really create a controversy of some type or the other. So, it comes with the territory. Like if Claudius were to increase his compensation by even $10 a month, which is nothing, the newspaper will make it look like, oh, this $10 could go to this family which has no food, life would be better.
Absolutely.
Yes. So at the end of the day, this is a system which is capitalistic and socialistic simultaneously, and it cannot figure out always what it should be when. And that's where the mistakes are made.
You're so right.
So actually, we wanted to ask this question to you because whatever, in Parliament, whenever there's a discussion on hiking the remuneration of the members of Parliament or the kind of benefits that the members get, and, a very small percentage of benefits the actual voter or the actual constituent gets. So
right.
What steps do you as a Speaker of a Parliament wish to take or are currently taking so that there's more equity that goes to people?
Well, with the possible exception of Singapore, politicians the world over are generally underpaid. Because one of the things politicians fear most of all is the wrath of the voter by increasing any remuneration to politicians. In St. Lucia, the prime minister makes less money than the average CEO. In the United States, the president, and I use the word only advisedly, only makes $400,000. That's what CEOs make monthly. So politicians are not generally well paid. And I don't expect that situation to change anytime soon because we are afraid of the wrath of the people. But on the other hand, it does lead politicians to think seriously about how to complement or supplement their income in ways they ought not to be thinking about. And that is one of the dangers. At least in Singapore, where the politicians are paid handsomely, there are laws to ensure that if you breach integrity rules or you commit crimes, I mean, you can face even the death penalty. So there is incentive not to become corrupt. But we don't have those sort of laws. And I'm not sure, Dr. Khosla, that those sort of laws would even pass muster in democracies like the United States and elsewhere. The Supreme Court might strike it down immediately.
Yeah, I think you're right, they will not. But having said that, I do believe that putting people in positions of influence and power and then not paying them, I'm not going to say adequately, but just say fairly, is actually a big mistake. It's inviting them to be corrupt. Exactly what you said, right? It's literally inviting them to be corrupt because they have influence and they have power. So they have access to all forms of corruption. And then not giving them a basic standard of quality of life is actually a mistake. Secondly, even if you were to give them a basic standard of life, like for example, a senator in the US, which is a powerful position, I think they have paid like $180,000 or something like that. But let's say you were to change it to $300,000 a year. The incremental dollar impact is minuscule. It is only the newspapers that blow it out of proportion and make it like an emotional impact and get the people worked up. And the last thing I want to say is the reason these laws don't change is because the politician gets married to the position more than the function he or she decided to pursue. And when you do that, then you're not able to make these tough choices.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Thank you so much. The next question, we are nearly at the conclusion of the session, but I would request the patience of both our guests that we might overshoot a little for 2 or 4 minutes.
I'm enjoying myself, so that's okay.
Me too.
Super, great. Thank you so much. The next question comes from Amber. Amber, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir. Hello, my name is Amber Kim So-han. I'm an MP from South Korea. I'm studying in Seifu International School in Malaysia. My question is to Dr. Pradeep Khosla. Since your profession is software and robotics, one of the negative effects of AI implementation of software is spreading misinformation or discriminative messages so that the target audiences will be satisfied. Are there any solutions that can prevent this situation or any courses of actions?
So let me ask you a question. I'm going to just give you a little stream of consciousness about AI. Are there human beings who lie? Have you met human beings who lie? How many of you have met human beings who lie? Right? We've all met people who lie. Is lying misinformation? Okay. Are there human beings that make mistakes, that get into accidents? Yes, that's why we have insurance. So point I'm trying to make is expecting technology to not have the similar, how should I say, limitations of human beings is actually a mistake. There will be no perfect AI. It might make fewer mistakes, but it will make mistakes. There will be no notion of perfect information. So what I think the issue with misinformation is not misinformation. The issue with misinformation is the velocity of propagation. And the velocity of propagation is so high. And this is a problem in the following sense. The human mind has not evolved over the last 10,000 years to do processing any faster today than it was doing 10,000 years. But the computer over these years has become like billion times faster. So we cannot process information at the same velocity as which it is being propagated or being created. And that's fundamentally the problem. So we then start believing what we hear without having the ability or the time to process. Okay. So this is where all of you need to develop this notion of patience. Even though information is coming to you at lightning speed, you don't want to absorb every piece of it right away. You want to take your time, understanding the hypothesis, understanding the basis, and then deciding. Because like Claudius said, once you decide the truth, it's going to last with you for a very long time. But falsehood, you could absorb right away, and they'll change the trajectory of your behavior in a bad way and society in a bad way, right? I really like the quote you had, Claudius, about lies is instantaneous and truth is a long distance runner. What was it? If you can repeat it.
It's that the truth is a long distance runner, whereas lies moves at the speed of a Usain Bolt.
Yeah, see?
I see.
That's a good one to remember, okay? So speed of propagation is
thank you so much, Pradeep sir. So Amber, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please.
I have a follow-up question. A lot of people say AI replacement of labor will result in limited job opportunities, especially in fields of liberal arts. But others claim it's the opposite, as AI robots cannot generate subjective or sudden and new ideas. So may I ask your opinion on this?
So I think both are true, right? Look, over the whole history of modern humanity or modern civilization is based around technology improving productivity, improving the quality of life for people. Okay. The world today with 8 billion people still has 2 billion that live on less than $1 a day, 4 billion that live on, I don't know, less than $2, $3 a day, which is still reasonably poor. So for all of these people to come out of poverty to a middle class or a lower middle class standard of living, you need technology. So instead of saying that AI is going to take jobs, AI is going to do jobs that are run-of-the-mill jobs, just like automation was doing that before, just like the steam engine was creating power that the human muscle did not have. And I can just go down the list, right? So I think being afraid of technology is a mistake. We need to embrace technology. And I'm going to use like an Indian mythology, and I'm sure it's also part of Greek mythology. So you see these gods and goddesses with multiple heads and multiple arms. Think of AI being everybody's superpower. We might all have a different AI avatar that would be our superpower. So that the question is, how do we use that superpower to become more productive and bring other people out of misery and poverty? And I can go, and this is the same is true about other types of technology, right? So I personally think we embrace technology as a superpower and ask ourselves, how can I deploy this to make the world a better place?
I see. So I guess we need some more patience, and we have to embrace more about the new situation.
We don't need
That was-
patience, Amber, as much as we need to embrace, right? So, okay, take another example. Who thought that YouTube could create a profession of influencers? Any one of you thought there was a
No.
profession called influencers like 20 years ago before you were born? I don't think so. Claudius didn't think so. I didn't think so. What happened is, this is again technology. You have technology that took some jobs away, but then it created other opportunities, like influencer, for example. Now you can sit in your house and in your YouTube channel, you can make money thanks to Yahoo and Facebook and everybody else, where you're showing ads and boring people, right? So what I'm saying is opportunities are being created to create wealth. The question is, can we create more wealth and then distribute it more equitably? Our problem is, even the wealth we have, we don't know how to distribute more equitably. So that's what I'm looking for.
I see. So jobs disappear and some new jobs are born again.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
see. That was quite very new insight I've never heard of. Thank you for the answers.
Thank you so much,
we have
Pradeep.
to, Angie, we have to keep reinventing ourselves. We have to readapt to a changing world. I know friends of mine who began as engineers, as nurses, and to adapt into this society, they became medical doctors. So the days when Pradeep and I were younger, where we could say in our college days, we were going to be X and remain X until the last days of our lives, I am not sure the younger generation will have the same profession that they did at 20 when they are 60.
Absolutely. So I think a very important convincing statement Pradeep has coined today, that a lot of countries with God-fearing people will be using for AI, that when you think of AI, think of it as adding more hands and heads to you, like the gods you have. So it will add a good convincing factor to it. So thank you so much. The next question comes from Ishanvi Acharya. Ishanvi, over to you.
Greetings to distinguished dignitaries present over here and all the attendees. I am MP Shanvi Acharya, studying in 9th grade from Millsbury International School, Kathmandu, Nepal. And my question today is directed towards Honourable Mr. Claudius James Francis. And I have very I had a brainstorming and I just got this question, and it is really asking an answer for it. And the question is that, how would you like to be remembered for your contributions to St. Lucia, especially in terms of the impact you've had on young people?
I just want to be remembered as somebody who did the best that he could.
So we have actually taken, there are a lot of questions, but we are nearly, there's a dearth of time. So before the session comes to an end, we would request both our guests today to give a 1-minute message to all the teenagers across the globe, that why should they become more active in democracy? Why should they understand the role of citizenry in their countries? And why should they get involved in the process of building a community or running their own country? So over to Claudius, sir, for your closing statement for the 21st Parliamentary session.
Well, thank you very much, and it was my pleasure to be here. And all I want to say to the young people is, look at what's happening around the world. Look at Greta. Greta has become the greatest advocate for climate change, perhaps in the last 50 years. She was a teenager. I think she still is a teenager. And nobody thought she would have had that sort of influence that she has had, to the point where she's even nominated in a Nobel Prize. So do not look at your age, your lack of experience. In fact, it is precisely because of your lack of experience that you bring a fresh perspective to the discussions that we are having. Some of us are set in our ways. It's difficult to change our minds about certain things, but you bring that fresh perspective, that energy. And again, I want to go back to what Pradeep began with. I do hope many of you, in fact, do join the political landscape do become politicians, and that I can read in the next 10 years that at least 10 of you who participated today are actually MPs in your respective countries. But thank you very much, Das, for having me, for inviting me. I really do appreciate that. I appreciate the interaction of the young people. It's a regenerative thing for me. They make you feel young again. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request Pradeep, sir, for the closing statement. But before, in your closing statement, we would request one thing. Since you're from education, should studying and understanding civics and citizenship be a part of education? And what should be done more that, there's active citizenry that happens?
So that's actually a good question, Daksh. I can tell you that when I was a young student in India, history, civics, and geography was one course, right, with 3 components. I come to the US and there's no civics being taught. And over the course of the last decade, I have run into several people, the most eminent being Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who was a Supreme Court Justice, who actually has created an organization that is trying to bring civics education back into schools. I think there is something fundamental about civics and civility that has to be part of education. I mean, it cannot be just about history and democracy. Without civility, we become like an animal organization, right? So the short answer is yes. My advice to all of you is, if you don't want to live in the world that other people are defining, then you owe to yourself to define the world you want to live in. End of story. And that should be the reason for you to be involved, energized, and start making changes, because you want to live in a world that you want to live, not that I want to define for you.
Thank you so much, Pradeep, sir. Don't live in a definition of the world. Define the world that you want to be in.
Right.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of the 21st Parliamentary Session of the World Teen Parliament. Thank you so much to both of our guests, all the teen members of Parliament. Stick to the work that you're doing. You're doing amazing work on ideas of world improvement that you have given, inviting more and more teenagers to be a part of the World Teen Parliament. The registrations for the 3rd World Teen Parliament have already started. So if you have missed, go on the website, have a look at it, and be a part of the Teen Parliament. It's an absolutely free initiative. You don't need to spend anything to be a part of it. The only thing that you'll spend is your intelligence, your creativity, and your commitment. And please do that so there's more active citizenry that's there in the world. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of the 21st Parliamentary Session of the World Teen Parliament.
Claudius, I'll look you up in St. Lucia.
I was about to tell you I'm looking you up in California.
Please do. If you're here, let me know.
Yeah, and if there are any members of the group who wants to get in touch with us, you can get our email address from Dask, and you can certainly keep in touch with us. I'd like that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you. Okay, good night. Good morning.